Hello and welcome to How to Train Driving Instructors. This is one part of a very long course on helping people online how to become a driving instructor trainer. Today's session looks at completing the feedback forms, which is a very important one and something I get asked quite a lot. Now, there are many different ways of completing feedback forms and different types of feedback forms. But this is the feedback form that I produce, and this is the one that I use with my trainers. And in the back of the feedback and development books, the reflective logs, if you're using my system for your trainees, you will find these are already fitted into the pages, inserted into the pages at the relevant places. Now, often people are not quite sure exactly how to fill them in, so I thought I'd help. Now, as I said, my way is one way. It's one way of simplifying it to make it easier for you to help. Let's look at the form basics first of all. Now, in the top section, we have basically what's in there. You can see it there. It's got the check it's a correct unit, etc. At the top, there is a unit number over here. Let me just highlight that for you. There's a unit number over here. Fill in the unit number if necessary. The hours that you put down, if it's a 1 hour or 2 hour session, then let's put that down in there. The trainer's name, clearly, the date, and the name printed for the trainee. All fairly simple, no problems there. Okay, on the next section, you'll see something that says recap, and I put a bit more information in there than I used to have. It's reflecting on the last session. I mean, even if this is the very first session with them, you can talk about history, things that they've done before, but you would normally look at the last session and reflect, asking questions about the theory and how it needs to be used in the following sessions, for example, or whatever. But we're going to build. Remember, every lesson, it's telling the story. You're building on the previous story. A recap shouldn't pose us too much problems. Looking at any reflections they filled out. So in the book, you'll see that there are sections where the trainee can fill out reflective sheets, bits what they feel. Check any homework or preparation that they've had to do for this lesson. You're going to do that within this section. You're trying to ascertain, are they ready for this session? If you're about to get them to deliver a lesson to you as a role-playing learner on junctions, they need to have gone away and produced a plan or use one of my plans, but they'll need to understand the plan. So you will need to question them on the plan to understand, are they ready for this session? Just like a learner, really. Some forms, as I said, already have the recap filled in for you, or part of it will be filled in for you to help you, to prompt you really into what you should be looking for in this section. Okay, the next section in that is just today's topic. Okay, so you're going to be putting down the topic. Well, for part 2 test, are you introducing MSPSL or POM to them? Are you looking at the manoeuvres, etc.? But remember, when you're coming to part 3, topics are not necessarily turning the road, not necessarily junctions, etc. Topics are more going to be like control of a lesson or feedback, things like that. You're working on that. You might be using communication, how to communicate with your learners as a subject. But we would use junctions, or I use junctions as a way of teaching that. Why do I do this? Junctions is one of the very first moving lessons with the pupil, and the trainee instructor or the PDI, it's the first time really that they realise how much information they've got to give in a short space of time. You may remember from your own training, you're saying to your pupil, okay, we're going to use the mirrors, now the signal, and you suddenly realise you've actually approached the junction and you're past the junction and it's there. So I'm using that. So it's not so much teaching about junctions, because they should know them. They're drivers, they've been driving for years. It's more about how the communication would work and things like that. And that's just one example. It's discussing what they're going to be covering today. Talking about how it will be covered, explaining to them when you're in role and when you're out of role. You will make sure you know, very, very important this, we'll cover it later on when we talk about role playing. In your next section is your feedback. Okay, I've given you a hint there, what could have been better and why. So I normally start by speaking to my learner, and I know my trainee, I know what faults they've made, but I'm coaching. I'm not going to just look up and say, you did this wrong, you did this wrong, you did this wrong. I might sort of first of all offer them and say, how do you think that session went? What could have been better with that session? And 9 times out of 10, they will give you things that they weren't happy with, and it's normally the fits in with what you felt. How could we make that better? We, how can I help? How can we make that better? Or how can you make that better? Trying to get them to take some responsibility into the ownership of what they're doing. And that's what you put down here. You might put down, yes, you needed to speak clearer. You needed to watch the pupil more to spot the faults, etc. You would be putting that down into here. Also, we look at the why. Why do they need to do this? For example, if they're not looking at the pupil because they're looking out the window, why is it important that they look at the learner? Why do they need to spot all those faults? So, as my notes say, what went wrong and why? How could it have been better? They will normally come up with things. Tell if needed. If they really don't know, then you can tell them. And relate it to specific competencies. I'm saying, if they're leaving talking to you too late, then it's communication. If they're missing faults, etc., then it's down to they're not giving you the correct feedback or risk analysis and things like that. And then ask them how they can improve and put that down. Discuss, put it down how they would improve. This becomes part of the agreement really between you and them. So looking at the pupil more, if it was they weren't watching for faults, watching the pupil using the MSPSL routine more themselves. So they're saying at the end of the road, I would like you to turn to the right, and they're watching for the mirrors, check, the signal, check, the position out the window, check, the speed, yeah, that feels good, and the look. So the trainee instructor actually uses those routines themselves in their head, checking for the faults. Get that agreement, because this forms the basis of what's going to happen next. And the next section is the development. Well, this is the bit where we're going to write down how they would sort out the problems in the last thing. Whether they need homework to do, what they're going to do between now and next session, what they would need to do. If they were giving you poor knowledge of something, then between now and next session, you're going to say to them, right, you need to go and read the highway code. You need to read driving essential skills. You need to look up this, You need to also consider where else you've been giving me wrong knowledge. A common fault in this area is they get on Facebook and they start asking other driving instructors and they think, oh, that sounds good, and they start bringing that into their lessons. But of course, it's totally wrong, most more often than not. So you need to say, well, what else have you learned on Facebook? What else? They need to become there. But that's just one example. But here is that agreement. They're now going to work out what it is they should do better, and they're going to agree with you what they're going to do between now and the next session in order to help that. And that's what it says here. How should it be done? Use examples or stories if you need of your own learners, or where it went wrong. Try to get them to see where the problem could be, and again, get agreement. Okay, very important. Get the agreement and discuss homework. Again, this becomes the focus of next week's recap. So next week you will be saying to them on that recap, so last week I set you this, and how have you got on with that, etc. And we would talk about, so maybe next week you're doing something else. This is where you would put down what they're going to be doing next week and any preparation that they need to do in readiness for this. So they may have preparation from the previous section that they've got to work on from faults from today, but they may have homework to do ready for the next session, and that all goes here. And I should have put in there, get agreement. Now, a really, really important section at the end is the signatures. You both must sign, okay? Both sign. This is forming a bit of an agreement. Now, if you go on to do audit, this is a very, very important thing. So both sign. This is evidence of what's been agreed. It might be needed later. Let me give you some scenarios. You may have been the best instructor going, you may have given them every help, everything needed, but you know, at the end of the day, somebody just will not do what you tell them. They will not be coached, they won't agree with you, etc. They go and fail their part 3 test, they complain to the examiner. They go to the DVSA, my training was rubbish. He did not teach me this, he did not teach me that. DVSA may or may not get involved. First thing the DVSA will do is say, can I see your reflective worksheet? Can I see your training manual? Can I see your training books? Okay. If in your training log it is saying things like, Michael is not watching the pupils enough, Michael is looking out the window, Michael has agreed that Michael will start using this, etc., etc., and Michael has signed everything to say he will, and the reason they failed their test is because Michael, your trainee, was looking out the window. It's not, the examiner's going to go, but your trainer has said here that you're not doing this. Your trainer, and you have signed and you have agreed to work on this. You have clearly not worked on it. He comes back at the PDI. You have not done it. So this is your evidence trail, your policeman's notebook, so to speak. You know, it's there, it says it. If you see it, write it down, get the agreement. If a PDI fails a test, it will, if you're doing your job right, you would have seen the faults, you would have told them what they need to be doing to correct it. If they don't correct it, it's little you can do. So, and like I said, it's an absolute must for audit. Now, with my school, what I tend to do now is I get my trainers now to take a photograph of this into the feedback book, because it's actually attached into the reflective logback. That photograph, well, in the old days, always had to be sent back to the school for audit. It's a bit different now, but I would, if you're with a school or something, or you're one of my trainers' schools, then that gets sent back to the office. In the old days, legally, the trainee should have had a copy, legally. The school should have had a copy, and the trainer didn't actually need one. And often people say, well, why not? Well, if necessary, you just pick up the pupils' feedback book next week and you read what you put there. Keep a copy, obviously, if you want, but there is no actual requirement when it comes to audit. Send them off to school, keep a copy of them, etc. Or certainly the school must keep a copy of them, and then you've got that evidence, and you never know if they may be used later. But the feedback is really, really important. That is where your agreement comes between you and your trainee, your PDI, where they will agree to cover each aspect. That's the end of this. It's a very short one, really. I hope it didn't help you. There are a couple of other forms which you might come across, certainly within my group. So we have a form which is basically a copy of the driving test sheet when it was in the written format. And my guys can download those, and you will be able to download those from the website as well. It's just a copy of a driving test form. The other one I have is looks basically like the feedback form the examiner would give, the ADI, the SC1 form, or the ADI1 form, with the boxes with all the 17 competencies in, and we use these as well. But they're tip sheets, really. You can use them in your lessons to evidence with your PDI that they're not doing certain competencies, or are, but they're taking that. This feedback form is the important one. This is the one that really goes for everything. Speak to you all soon. Thank you very much. Have a really good week. Bye bye.